The knock sounded simple. 2 taps. Nothing aggressive. Nothing urgent. Just enough to announce presence. Alex stood at the door, his hand still hovering in the air for a second longer than necessary. Like even he wasn't fully sure why he had done it. The street behind him was quiet. A typical London afternoon. Gray sky, distant traffic, people moving on with their lives. No one knew what this moment meant. No one cared. But to him, this was everything. A year, 12 full months since he had walked away from this exact place. Since he convinced himself that distance would bring clarity. That leaving was the right decision. He exhaled slowly. His chest felt tight, but not from fear, from expectation. Because in his mind, this moment had already played out 100 times. Alice opens the door. There's silence. Then emotion. Maybe anger. Maybe relief. But something familiar. Something that said there was still something left between them. That was the version he believed in. That was the version he came back for. From inside the house, he heard something faint. Music. Soft. Rhythmic. Alive. His brows pulled together slightly. That was new. The house used to be quiet. Controlled. Predictable. Just the way he liked it. But now, there was sound. Life. It caught him off guard, more than he expected. Then came something else. Laughter. Not forced. Not polite. Real laughter. His body stiffened slightly. That didn't match the story in his head. A flicker of discomfort moved through him, but he pushed it down quickly. It didn't mean anything. Maybe she had people over. Friends. Family. That was normal. That was her. Still, something about it didn't sit right with him. His mind tried to correct itself, to rebuild the version of reality he came prepared for. She'll be surprised, he told himself quietly. Maybe even happy. Footsteps approached from inside. Steady, unhurried, closer. Alex straightened slightly, adjusting his posture without thinking. This was it. The moment the door handle turned, a soft click. The door opened, and there she was, Alice. For a brief second, everything else disappeared. The noise, the street, the time that had passed. It all faded, because there she stood, exactly where she had always been. But something was different, not obvious, not something you could point to immediately. But it was there, in the way she stood, in the way she looked at him. There was no shock, no visible hurt, no emotional rush, just calm. Alex. Her voice was steady, neutral, like she was acknowledging someone she knew, not someone she had lost. That alone was enough to throw him off balance. Hi, he replied, his voice slightly unsure, though he tried to hide it. For a moment, neither of them moved. Neither of them filled the silence. And for the first time since arriving, something inside Alex shifted, because this wasn't going the way he expected. Not even close. Before he could say anything else, a voice came from inside the house. A man's voice. Relaxed, familiar, comfortable. Babe, is that the delivery? Everything stopped. Not slowly, not gradually, instantly. Alex didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. His brain tried to process what he had just heard, but it didn't fit anywhere. Not in his expectations. Not in the story he built on his way here. Not in the version of reality he believed he was walking back into. His eyes shifted slightly, past Alice, into the house, as if he could confirm it, as if he could prove to himself that he misheard. But the silence that followed didn't help. It only made it louder. He looked back at Alice, waiting, expecting something, an explanation, a reaction, anything. But she didn't rush, didn't panic, didn't try to fix the moment. She simply stood there, calm, present, grounded. And in that silence, the first crack in Alex's certainty began to break. Because deep down, before he even admitted it, he felt it. This wasn't the same place he left. And whatever he thought he was coming back to might not be waiting for him at all. Now pause for a second, because this moment right here, it's not just Alex's story. It might be yours too. Have you ever walked away from someone? Not because you stopped caring, but because you convinced yourself things would be better without them? Be honest. Have you ever told yourself, I just need space, thinking everything would still be there when you came back? The same person, the same connection, the same version of love you left behind, because in your mind, you didn't end it. You just stepped away. And stepping away feels safe, doesn't it? No big explosion, no dramatic ending, no moment where everything clearly breaks, just distance. just silence, just time passing quietly. It feels easier that way, cleaner, like you can return whenever you're ready, like nothing really changes. But here's the truth most people don't want to face. Life doesn't pause just because you stepped out of it. People don't freeze in place, waiting for you to figure things out. They keep living. They keep growing. They keep becoming versions of themselves that don't depend on your return. And sometimes that change happens so gradually, you don't even notice it until it's too late. Until you're standing at a door you once called home, hearing a voice that doesn't belong to you, feeling like a stranger in a place you thought you still had access to. Because the hardest part isn't always losing someone in a single moment. It's realizing they've been slipping away for a long time, and you didn't do anything to stop it. Or worse, you didn't even see it happening. Look at Alec, standing there, frozen, trying to make sense of something that doesn't match what he believed. Because in his mind, this was supposed to be a return, not a discovery, not a confrontation, not a moment where everything he thought he understood falls apart in seconds. And yet, that's exactly where he is, right at the edge of a truth he wasn't ready for. So let me ask you something again. And this time, don't rush your answer. If you walked away from someone today, would you still recognize their life a year from now? Or would you come back and realize you were never part of the version they became? Because here's something people don't talk about enough. You don't always lose people when they leave. Sometimes you lose them because you did. Because you chose distance, because you chose comfort over growth, because you assumed love would wait without needing effort. And now, Alex is standing face to face with that reality, not in theory, not in hindsight, but in real time, right here, at this door, with Alice standing in front of him. Not broken, not waiting, not hoping, but whole. And whatever comes next won't be about what he wants. It will be about what he lost. Here's where most people get it wrong. They believe love ends in one moment, one argument, one mistake, one final decision, something loud, something obvious, something you can point to and say, that's when everything broke. But that's not how it usually happens. What you're looking at right now, what Alex is standing in front of, this didn't start today. This didn't begin with that voice from inside the house. It didn't even begin the day he walked out with his suitcase. No. It started long before that. It started in the small moments, the quiet ones, the ones people ignore because they don't feel serious enough to matter. A conversation that didn't go deep enough, a feeling that didn't get addressed, a distance that wasn't questioned. Those moments don't seem dangerous at first. They feel normal, manageable, temporary. You tell yourself, we're just going through a phase. You say, it'll fix itself. You convince yourself that love is strong enough to survive without attention, without adjustment, without effort. And that's where everything begins to fall apart, not in chaos, but in comfort. Because comfort makes you stop trying. It makes you assume the person beside you will always be there, no matter how little you show up. And slowly, without any dramatic warning, things begin to change. The laughter becomes less frequent. The conversations become shorter. The connection becomes quieter, not peaceful, just distant. And if you're not paying attention, you won't even notice how far things have gone. Until one day, you find yourself standing in a moment like this, where everything looks the same on the outside, but feels completely different. Because the truth is, people don't always leave when they walk out the door. Sometimes they leave while they're still right beside you, emotionally, mentally, piece by piece. And if nothing interrupts that process, if no one steps in and says, something is wrong, and we need to fix it, then that distance keeps growing, quietly, steadily, until there's nothing left to hold on to. And by the time someone finally realizes what's happening, it's already too late. That's the part nobody prepares you for. The delayed realization, the moment where everything clicks, but there's no longer anything to save. Look at Alec, right now, standing in front of Alice, hearing another man's voice inside a space he once called his. This isn't just shock. This is understanding catching up with him. Because deep down, he knows this didn't happen overnight. He knows this didn't come out of nowhere. This is the result of every moment he chose not to show up. Every time he pulled back instead of leaning in. Every time he expected Alice to adjust. while he stayed the same. And now, he's facing the version of reality that grew in his absence. A version that didn't need him to continue. A version that moved forward without waiting. And the hardest part? There's no argument he can make against it. Because the truth doesn't need to raise its voice. It just stands there, clear, undeniable, and impossible to change. Before we go any further into this story, I want you to do something simple but important. If you've ever experienced something like this, if you've ever walked away from someone, or had someone walk away from you, take a second, like this video, drop a comment, and tell me honestly, do you think people deserve a second chance after they've already let you go once? Because stories like this, they're not just stories. They're reflections of real choices, real consequences, and real growth. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because here, we don't just tell stories. We show you the moments that change people forever. Welcome back to Mr. George Stories, where life's most powerful lessons come wrapped in unforgettable tales. If you're new to this family, thank you for being here. And make sure you hit that subscribe button, because it helps us bring more stories like this to people who need to hear them. Now, let's go back. Not to this moment at the door. Not to the voice inside the house. Not to the shock Alex is standing in right now. We're going back to the beginning, before the distance, before the silence, before everything slowly fell apart. Back to a time when this story didn't feel like a lesson. It felt like love. Because what you're seeing right now, this outcome, it didn't start here. It didn't start with Alex knocking on that door. It didn't start with Alice standing in front of him, calm and unchanged. It started much earlier, in a city that doesn't pause for anyone, a city that keeps moving. Whether your world is falling apart or coming together, London, where everything looks the same on the outside, but inside people are living completely different realities. That's where Alice lived. And at 27, she had already experienced two completely different versions of life. One that was full of warmth, energy, connection. The kind of life where laughter filled every corner of a room, where conversations overlapped, where silence was rare and joy was loud. That was her foundation. That was the world that shaped her. And then there was the other life, the one she built later, the one that looked stable from the outside, calm, structured, controlled. But inside, something was missing, something that slowly faded without her even realizing how much it mattered. And right in the center of that second life was Alec, a man who didn't enter her world loudly, didn't disrupt everything all at once, but slowly changed the way it felt. Because not all changes come with warning signs. Some changes are quiet, subtle, almost invisible at first, until one day you look around and realize everything feels different. And that's where this story really begins. Not at the end, not at the moment of shock, but at the very start, when Alice and Alex first crossed paths, when everything still felt possible, when love didn't feel complicated, when neither of them knew how far apart they would eventually become. So stay with me, because what you're about to see is how something that started so simply ended in a way neither of them expected. London didn't pause for anyone, not for heartbreak, not for love, not for the quiet moments where someone's life was about to change without them even realizing it. The streets stayed busy. The buses ran late like always. People moved with purpose, even when they had none. And somewhere in the middle of all that, Alice was laughing. Not quietly, not politely, fully. The kind of laugh that didn't ask for permission before it filled a space. It echoed lightly across the small bookstore cafe, turning a few heads without her even noticing. She sat near the window, one leg crossed over the other, a book open in front of her, but clearly not being read, because she was talking, animated, expressive, completely present. Across from her, someone was mid-story, but Alice had already taken over the moment. "You're lying," she said, shaking her head, smiling wide. "There's no way that actually happened." "It did," the person insisted. "No." She leaned forward slightly, eyes sharp but playful. "You added that part for drama." A nearby customer glanced over briefly, not annoyed, just aware, because Alice's energy didn't blend into spaces. It changed them. A few tables away, Alex noticed her. Not intentionally. At first, he had come in for the same reason he always did. Routine. A quiet place. a predictable environment, a space where nothing unexpected happened. He preferred that: order, control, consistency. His coffee sat untouched beside him, cooling slowly as he reviewed something on his laptop. Focused, structured, contained, until that laugh. It cut through his concentration without effort. He looked up, just for a second. That was all it took, because once he noticed her, he couldn't unnotice her. She didn't fit the environment, not in the way everyone else did. She wasn't quiet. She wasn't reserved. She wasn't trying to disappear into her own space. She existed fully, and somehow that pulled his attention without asking for it. He watched for a moment longer than necessary, not staring, but not exactly looking away either, trying to understand what it was that made her different. And then she caught him. Her eyes shifted, locked onto his. No hesitation, no confusion, just awareness. And then she smiled, not shy, not subtle, direct. It was the kind of smile that said, "I see you." Alex blinked once, slightly caught off guard. Most people would look away, pretend it didn't happen, but Alice didn't. She tilted her head slightly, still looking at him, still smiling. And then she spoke, loud enough for him to hear. "Are you going to keep looking?" she said. "Or are you going to say something?" A few people nearby glanced up, not because it was dramatic, but because it was unexpected. Alex closed his laptop slowly, not rushed, not flustered, but something in his expression had shifted. He stood up, walked over, each step controlled, but not as confident as usual. He stopped at her table, looked at her directly. "I was trying to figure out," he said calmly, "if you always laugh that loud." Alice leaned back slightly, studying him now. Then she smiled again, wider. "Only when something's funny," she replied. "Maybe you should try it sometime." There was a brief pause, not awkward, just charged, because something had already shifted. Neither of them said it, but both of them felt it. "Sit," Alice said casually, gesturing to the empty chair. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even a suggestion. It was an assumption. And for a man like Alex, that was unusual. He hesitated for half a second, then sat. "What were you working on?" she asked, glancing toward his laptop. "Nothing exciting," he replied. "That sounds like something exciting people say when they don't want to explain," she said. He almost smiled. "Almost. You always this direct?" he asked. "Yes." No pause, no hesitation, just truth. Their conversation didn't follow a script. It didn't build slowly. It didn't need time to warm up. It just flowed, naturally, easily, unexpectedly. Alice talked about her family, her culture, her childhood, the way her house was never quiet growing up. Alex listened, really listened, not just waiting for his turn to speak, but actually trying to understand. And when he did speak, it was measured, intentional, carefully thought through. "I like quiet," he said at one point. Alice raised an eyebrow. "I noticed. It helps me think." She nodded slowly. "I get that." Then added, "But life isn't supposed to be quiet all the time." That stayed with him more than he expected. Hours passed without either of them noticing. The cafe got busier, then quieter again. People came and left, but they stayed, still talking, still learning each other. At some point, Alice stood up. "I have to go," she said. Alex nodded. Of course. Moments like this didn't usually last. That's what he expected. But then she looked at him. Direct, certain. "Are you going to see me again?" she asked. No games, no pretending, just clarity. Alex paused, then answered honestly. "Yes," she smiled, satisfied. "Good," she said, then turned and walked out. And just like that, something had started, not loudly, not dramatically, but clearly. And Alex, who built his life around control and predictability, had just stepped into something that had neither. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever met someone who completely disrupted your routine in a way you didn't expect? Drop a comment below, because moments like this, they don't just change your day, they change your direction. And for Alex and Alice, this was only the beginning. What started between Alice and Alex didn't feel complicated. It felt balanced, not because they were the same, but because their differences made things interesting, at least in the beginning. Their relationship moved forward naturally. No pressure, no forced milestones, just two people choosing to spend more time together, until time together became the default. Alex introduced Alice to his world first. Quiet restaurants, dim lighting, evenings where conversations were calm, controlled, and never interrupted. At first, Alice found it different, not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. She sat across from him one evening, watching the way he moved through that space so easily. "How do you even enjoy this?" she asked, glancing around. Alex looked up from his glass. "Enjoy what?" "This," she said, gesturing lightly. "It's so quiet." He gave a small shrug. "It's peaceful." Alice tilted her head slightly. Peaceful and silent are not the same thing. He didn't respond immediately, but he noticed that. Then came her world. And this was something Alex wasn't prepared for. The first time Alice took him to one of her family gatherings, he didn't say much on the way there, but when they arrived, everything changed. The door barely opened before voices filled the space. Laughter, music, people talking over each other. Someone shouting from another room. Someone else calling Alice's name before she even stepped fully inside. "Alice!" She lit up instantly. Different energy, different presence. Like she had stepped into a version of herself that didn't hold anything back. "You made it?" someone said, pulling her into a quick hug. Then eyes turned to Alex, quickly, curiously, assessing, but not unkind. "And this must be Alex," another voice said. Alice smiled. "Yeah. This is Alex." He nodded politely. "Nice to meet you." But the moment didn't pause for long. It couldn't, because everything around him kept moving, fast, loud, alive. At one point, Alice grabbed his hand. "Come on," she said. "Where?" "Kitchen." "Why?" She smiled. "You'll see." Inside, someone was cooking. Someone else was arguing about how it should be cooked. Music played in the background, and somehow, everyone was involved in everything at once. Alex stood there for a moment, taking it in, trying to find a way to fit into something that didn't follow the structure he was used to. Alice noticed. She leaned closer. "You okay?" He nodded. "Yeah," but his tone wasn't convincing. Still, he stayed. He tried, and that mattered to her. That night, as they left, Alice glanced at him. "Well?" He exhaled slightly. "There, a lot." She laughed. "Yeah. That's the point." And for a while, that difference didn't feel like a problem. It felt like growth. Alex learned to stay a little longer in her world. Alice learned to slow down a little in his. They adjusted. They met somewhere in the middle. That's what made it work. And when Alex proposed, it wasn't dramatic. No grand gesture. No crowd. Just the two of them. They were sitting together. Quiet evening. Simple setting. Alex looked at her long enough for her to notice. "What?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. "Then, life is quieter without you," he said. Alice smiled slightly. "That's because I bring the noise." He shook his head. "Not noise," he said. "Life." There was a pause, a real one, the kind that carries weight. "I don't want to go back to how things were before you," he added. Alice studied him carefully, not rushing, not reacting too quickly. Then she asked, "What are you saying, Alex?" He reached into his pocket. Simple, direct, no theatrics. "Marry me." No long speech, no build-up, just truth. Alice didn't hesitate. "Okay." And just like that, they stepped into something bigger. At first, marriage didn't change them. It just gave them more space to be who they already were. Their home became a blend of both worlds. Music played sometimes. Silence existed too. Dinner could be lively or quiet. It worked because they were still choosing each other. But slowly, without either of them marking the moment it began, things started to shift. Not loudly, not suddenly, but noticeably. Alex's routines became more fixed. Work took more of his time. Evenings became quieter, not occasionally, consistently. Alice adjusted at first. That's what love looks like in practice. You make room, you compromise. You tell yourself it's temporary. One night, she turned on music while cooking. Nothing too loud, just enough to fill the silence. Alex walked in, paused, looked at her, then at the speaker. "Can you turn that down?" he asked. Alice glanced at him. "Why?" "It's distracting." She hesitated, just for a second, then turned it down. No argument, no tension, just a small moment. But moments like that don't disappear. They stack. Another time, her friends came over. Not planned, just spontaneous. Laughter filled the space again. Energy returned. For a few hours, the house felt like hers again. Alex stayed in the other room, working, avoiding. After they left, he came out, looked around, then said, "That was a lot." Alice crossed her arms slightly. "They're my friends, I know, but—" He paused, then said it carefully. "They're just too much sometimes." Silence. Because this time, it didn't feel like an observation. It felt like judgment. And that's where the first real crack appeared. Not because of what he said, but because of what it meant. Alice looked at him. Really looked. "And I'm not?" she asked. He didn't answer, and that silence, that was louder than anything else. From that point on, something changed. Not everything, not immediately, but enough. Alice spoke a little less freely, adjusted a little more often, measured herself in ways she never used to. Alex didn't notice it happening because, to him, things felt more comfortable, more controlled, more aligned with what he preferred. But comfort for one person was slowly becoming restriction for the other. Then came the dinner invitation. Alice stood in the living room, phone in hand. "My family is doing something this weekend," she said. Alex didn't look up immediately. "Okay, I want you to come." That made him pause. "Alice." She waited. "There a lot?" he said again. This time, she didn't laugh. "They're my family." "I know." "Then why does that sound like a problem?" He exhaled. "It's just overwhelming." She stepped closer. "And your world isn't?" That hit something. Because now, this wasn't about preference. This was about difference. And neither of them knew how to bridge it anymore. That night, they didn't argue loudly. They didn't shout. They didn't break anything. But something broke anyway. Because from that moment, they stopped trying to understand each other. And when that stops, distance begins. Not physical, not yet, but emotional. And emotional distance always comes first. The house didn't change overnight. It still looked the same. Same furniture, same layout, same walls holding everything in place. But something inside it shifted, not physically, but in how it felt. Mornings became the first sign. Alice woke up before Alex most days. Not because she had to, because sleep didn't come as easily anymore. She lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, listening, waiting. Nothing. No music, no conversation, no reason to rush into the day. Eventually, she got up, walked into the kitchen, started her routine. Kettle on, cup out, tea. Simple, predictable, quiet. A few minutes later, Alex would walk in, dressed already, phone in hand, half present. "Morning," she said one day. "Morning," he replied, without looking up. That was it. No follow-up, no question, no connection. At first, Alice didn't react. She told herself, he's just busy. Work had always been important to Alec. That wasn't new. But what changed was how much space it started to take. Even when he wasn't working, he felt like he was. At breakfast, he checked emails. In the evenings, he reviewed documents. Even when sitting beside her, his attention was somewhere else. Alice noticed. Of course she did. But noticing something and confronting it are two different things. So she waited, hoping it would pass. It didn't. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into something harder to define. The house grew quieter, not peaceful, just empty. One evening, Alice sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone. Music played softly through her headphones, not loud enough to fill the room, just enough to fill the silence inside her. Alex sat across from her, laptop open, typing. The space between them wasn't large, but it felt like it stretched further than the room itself. She looked up, watched him for a moment. "You've been working a lot," she said. "I have deadlines," he replied. "I know." Silence. She waited for something else, anything. Nothing came. "Do you ever take a break?" she asked. He paused briefly, then said, "I'm fine." That answer ended the conversation. Not because she agreed, but because there was nowhere else to go. Another night, Alice stood in the kitchen again, cooking. She moved slower than usual, not because she didn't know what she was doing, but because there was no energy behind it, no music. She didn't turn it on this time. She had learned. Alex walked in, glanced at the counter. "What's that?" he asked. "Dinner," she said lightly. He nodded, sat down. No conversation, no curiosity, no moment of connection. They ate in silence, forks against plates. That was the loudest sound in the room. Halfway through, Alice put her fork down. Alex, he looked up. Finally. Yes? She hesitated, just slightly, because she already knew this conversation wouldn't go far. Do you feel like something's off? She asked. He frowned slightly. What do you mean? She searched for the words, not dramatic, not exaggerated, just honest. Us. That word hung there, between them. Alex leaned back slightly, not defensive, just distant. I think we're fine, he said. Alice studied him. Fine, she repeated. Yes, there was no depth behind it, no curiosity, no effort to explore what she meant, just an answer meant to close the topic. And that hurt more than if he had argued, because it told her something clearly. He didn't see a problem, which meant he wasn't looking for a solution. Days passed again. Alice started spending more time outside the house, not running away, just finding space where she could feel like herself again. She visited people, laughed more when she wasn't home, then came back to silence, to routine, to a version of her life that didn't match who she was. Alex noticed the changes, but not deeply. He registered that she was out more, that the house was emptier. But instead of questioning it, he adjusted to it. More space, more quiet, more control. Exactly what he thought he wanted. One night, Alice came home later than usual. She walked in, set her bag down. Alex was already there, working, as expected. You're back late, he said. Yeah, she replied. Where were you? With people who talk, she said. That made him look up. What's that supposed to mean? She met his eyes, calm. It means I missed conversation. Silence. Alex didn't respond immediately, not because he didn't hear her, but because he didn't know how to engage with that. And instead of trying, he went back to his screen. That was the moment something inside Alice shifted, not dramatically, not emotionally, just clearly, because she realized she wasn't being ignored by accident. She was being overlooked, and there's a difference. Ignored can be fixed. Overlooked means you're no longer being considered at all. That night, they went to bed without speaking again, not because they were angry, but because silence had become easier than trying. And once silence becomes the easier option, distance is no longer approaching. It's already there. Morning came without announcement. No alarm, no urgency, just light pushing through the curtains. Alice was already awake. She hadn't slept properly. Again, she lay still for a moment, staring ahead, not thinking, not planning, just existing. Beside her, Alex's side of the bed was empty. That wasn't unusual. He had started waking earlier, or maybe he just stopped coming to bed properly. She wasn't sure which one it was anymore. She sat up slowly, listened. No sound from the kitchen, no movement in the living room. That was different. Alice got out of bed, walked toward the hallway, and that's when she saw him. Alex stood near the wardrobe, a suitcase open on the bed. He was folding his clothes, carefully, neatly, deliberately. For a second, her brain didn't react. It tried to place the moment somewhere familiar. A work trip. That made sense. He traveled sometimes. But something about this felt different, not rushed, not last minute, planned. Alex? She said. He didn't respond immediately, just continued folding, placing another shirt into the suitcase. That silence answered more than words could. Alice stepped closer. You're traveling? She asked. He paused this time, just briefly, then continued. I think we need space. There it was, not loud, not aggressive, not even emotional, just stated. Alice blinked once. Space? She repeated. He zipped one section of the suitcase, adjusted something inside it. Yes, she stood there, processing, because that word, space, was too simple for what it carried. Space or distance? She asked. That made him stop. Finally, he looked at her, and for the first time in a while, he wasn't distracted. But what she saw in his eyes wasn't conflict. It was certainty. I don't think I fit into your world, he said. Alice let out a small breath. Not laughter, not disbelief, just recognition. Your world? She said quietly. Yes. She shook her head slightly. You were never supposed to fit, she replied. You were supposed to be part of it. Silence, not heavy, not explosive, just still. Alex looked down briefly, then back at her. I'm not happy, Alice. That landed, not because it was new, but because it was finally said out loud. Alice held his gaze. And you think leaving is going to fix that?" She asked. "I think staying isn't," he replied. Again, calm, measured, no anger, no frustration, just a decision already made. That's what made it harder, because there was nothing to argue against, no emotion to push back on, no heat, just distance, fully formed. Alice walked past him slowly, sat on the edge of the bed, the suitcase between them now. Not just physically, emotionally. "How long have you been thinking about this?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. That pause said enough. "A while," he admitted. She nodded once. "Of course, because nothing about this felt sudden. It felt like the final step of something that had already been happening." "You didn't say anything," she said. "I didn't know how to," he replied. She looked at him. "That's not true." He frowned slightly. "You just didn't try." That landed differently, not because it was harsh, but because it was accurate. Alex didn't respond. He went back to packing, folding another shirt, placing it inside, as if continuing the motion made the moment easier. Alice watched him, not crying, not breaking, just seeing everything clearly. "You know what's interesting?" she said after a moment. He didn't look up. "What?" "This doesn't even feel like you're leaving today." That made him pause again. She continued. "It feels like you've been leaving for a while." Silence, because there was nothing to deny. "You stopped being here a long time ago," she added. He exhaled slowly. "I didn't realize that," he said. Alice nodded. "I did." Another quiet moment passed. Then she asked, "Is there someone else?" He looked up immediately. No. No hesitation. No confusion. Just truth. She believed him. That wasn't the issue. The issue was something deeper. "Then what is it?" she asked. He searched for the answer, but the words didn't come easily, because what he felt wasn't simple. He started, then stopped. "This doesn't feel right anymore." Alice leaned back slightly. "Define this," she said. He hesitated again. "Us." That word didn't carry the same weight anymore. Not the way it used to. Alice stood up, walked toward the window, looked outside. People moving, cars passing, life continuing, completely unaffected by what was happening inside that room. She turned back. "You know what's funny?" she said. Alex waited. "We didn't even fight to get here." He said nothing. "No big argument. No major incident," she continued. "Just this." He nodded slightly. "Yeah." That agreement made it final. Because when both people see the end, there's nothing left to debate. Alex zipped the suitcase. The sound was quiet, but it marked something. A decision closing. He lifted it. Not heavy, at least not physically. Alice stepped aside, not blocking him, not stopping him, just making space. The same space he said he needed. He walked toward the door, paused, turned slightly. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said. Alice met his eyes. "I know." And she did. That's what made it worse. Because this wasn't done with anger. It was done with absence. He nodded once. Then he left. No door slam, no raised voice, no final words. Just footsteps fading, and silence returning. Alice stood there for a moment, listening, not to him, but to what remained, which was nothing. And that's how it ended. Not in chaos, but in quiet certainty. Because sometimes the loudest endings are the ones that make no sound at all. The door closed, without force, just a soft click. Alice didn't move immediately. She stayed exactly where she was, standing in the same spot, facing the space where Alex had just been. For a moment, her body expected something, a sound, footsteps coming back, a voice calling her name, something to interrupt what just happened. Nothing came. The house settled into stillness, not sudden, just complete. She looked toward the door, then away. There was no dramatic reaction, no collapse, no immediate tears, because the moment didn't feel new. It felt familiar, and that was the first thing that didn't sit right. Alice walked slowly into the living room, sat down, hands resting in her lap, still. Her mind didn't race. It didn't panic. It started connecting, piece by piece. Not what just happened, but everything that led to it. She thought about the mornings, the quiet ones, where good morning became routine instead of connection. She thought about the evenings, where they sat in the same room, but lived in separate spaces. She thought about the way conversations ended early, not because they were resolved, but because they weren't continued. And then something shifted. Because for the first time, she stopped seeing today as the moment he left and started seeing it as the moment it became visible. Alice leaned back slowly. "You didn't leave today," she said out loud. Her voice didn't shake. It was calm, pertain. "You've been gone for a while." That truth settled in quietly, and once it landed, it didn't move. She stood up, walked toward the kitchen, the same space where she used to play music, where she used to laugh, where she used to feel like herself. She looked around. Nothing had changed physically, but everything felt different now, because now she wasn't waiting for anything to return. Alice opened a cupboard, closed it again, not because she needed something, but because she needed movement, something to ground her in the present. Her eyes moved across the room. The chair Alex used, the spot where he sat, the table where they stopped talking, and suddenly everything made sense. Not emotionally, logically, because the signs were always there, not hidden, not complicated, just ignored. She let out a small breath, not heavy, not broken, just release. "I kept trying to hold on to something that wasn't there," she said quietly. That realization didn't hurt the way she expected it to, because it didn't come with shock. It came with clarity. And clarity doesn't shout, it settles. Alice walked back into the living room, sat down again. This time, she leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on her knees, focused, present. Because now, the situation wasn't confusing anymore. And once confusion disappears, you're left with truth. And the truth was simple. Alex didn't leave because of one moment. He didn't leave because of one argument. He didn't leave because something suddenly broke. He left because he had already disconnected, long before he packed that suitcase. And she had been holding on to someone who wasn't fully there. That realization should have hurt more, but instead, it freed something. Because if he had already been gone, then she hadn't just lost him today. She had been losing him gradually, and somehow, she survived that. Alice stood up again, walked toward the window, looked outside. People passing, cars moving, life continuing, unchanged. For a second, she let herself feel it, the weight of everything, not overwhelming, just real. Then, something unexpected happened. Her posture shifted, subtly, but clearly, because once the truth fully settled, there was nothing left to question, nothing left to chase, nothing left to fix. And in that space, something new had room to exist. Alice stepped back from the window, looked around the house again, this time, not as a place she shared, but as a place that still remained. "All right," she said quietly. A pause. Then, "Now we rebuild." That moment wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was important, because it marked a shift from holding on to letting go. She didn't cry right away. That came later, in smaller moments. Unexpected ones, but not here, not now, right now. She was clear, and clarity gave her something stronger than emotion, direction. Alice walked into the kitchen again, paused, then reached for her phone, scrolled for a second, then pressed play. Music filled the space, not loud, but enough to break the silence, enough to remind her. This house didn't belong to absence. She moved around slowly, not dancing, not yet, but not still either, because movement meant something. It meant life hadn't stopped, and that was the difference between someone leaving and everything ending. One had happened, the other hadn't. Alice exhaled again, this time lighter, because now she wasn't waiting anymore. And when you stop waiting, you start living again. That was the real turning point. Not the door closing, not the suitcase, not even his words, but this moment where she understood everything clearly and chose to move forward anyway. Because sometimes the end of something isn't the loss. It's the beginning of seeing things as they truly are. And once you see clearly, you don't go back. You build something new. The music stayed on, not for long. At first, Alice didn't turn it off, but she didn't turn it up either. It played in the background, low, steady, almost uncertain. She stood in the kitchen, listening to it, not reacting, just letting it exist. A few minutes passed, then she moved, not dramatically, just intentionally. She opened the windows, one by one. Cool air came in, carried distant city noise with it. Traffic, voices, movement. For the first time in a while, The house didn't feel sealed. Alice stepped back, looked around, the same space. But now, it didn't feel like something she had to preserve. It felt like something she could change. That thought stayed with her. She walked into the living room, stopped in the middle, turned slowly. Her eyes moved across everything: the couch, the table, the corners that had been quiet for too long. Then she said it again, more clearly this time. "All right." A small pause. "Let's fix this." The first change was simple. She walked over to the speaker, turned the volume up. Not loud, but enough to be heard in every corner of the house. The difference was immediate. The silence didn't disappear, but it no longer controlled the space. Alice moved back into the kitchen, opened the fridge, stared for a second, then laughed softly, because everything inside it looked planned, organized, predictable, like the life she had been living. She reached in, pulled things out, set them on the counter, not carefully, not perfectly, just freely. As she moved, the music shifted. The rhythm picked up slightly, and without thinking, Alice started moving with it. Not dancing fully, not yet, but her shoulders loosened. Her steps changed, and just like that, something started coming back. She paused, mid-step, realizing it, then shook her head slightly. "Okay, we're not going to act like this is sudden," she said quietly to herself, because it wasn't. This wasn't a transformation. It was a return. Alice picked up her phone, scrolled through it. Messages, missed calls, conversations she hadn't fully engaged with in a while. She stopped, looked at one thread, then typed, "Are you free this weekend?" She didn't overthink it, didn't rewrite it, just sent it. A reply came quickly. "Always." "What's going on?" Alice smiled. "Nothing serious. Just come over." She put the phone down. That was it. No long explanation, no hesitation. She turned back to the counter, started cooking again. But this time, it felt different. Not routine, not obligation, choice. Music played louder now. And this time, she didn't stop herself. She moved, fully. Small steps at first, then more. A turn, a shift. And then, a full laugh escaped her. Not forced, not controlled. Real. She stopped suddenly. Not because she had to, but because she noticed something. The house didn't feel empty anymore. Not because someone else was there, but because she was fully. Alice leaned against the counter, caught her breath, and looked around again. "You see?" she said softly, as if speaking to the space itself. "It wasn't you. It was me holding back." That realization didn't hurt. It clarified, because now, she wasn't trying to fit into something smaller. She was expanding back into who she already was. Hours passed. Not heavily, not slowly, naturally. The house changed in small ways. A chair moved. Music stayed on. The kitchen stayed active. Nothing dramatic, but everything meaningful. Later that day, a knock came at the door. Alice opened it. The moment the door swung open, a voice came in immediately. "Okay, first of all, why does it smell good in here?" Alice laughed, stepped aside. "Come in." The energy shifted instantly. Conversation filled the space. Movement returned. And just like that, the house felt alive again. At one point, the visitor looked around, took it all in, then said, "So, he left, and suddenly the house has personality again?" Alice paused, then smiled. "I think I was the personality the whole time." They both laughed. But beneath that moment, there was truth, because nothing new had been added. Nothing external had fixed the space. Alice had just stopped shrinking. And once she did, everything else followed. That night, the music didn't stop. The conversation didn't fade early. The energy didn't drop. Because this time, nothing was being held back. And for the first time since Alex left, the house didn't feel like something she lost. It felt like something she got back. The music didn't stop the next day. It carried into the morning. Not loud, but present. Alice woke up to it. Not from it. There was a difference. She didn't lie in bed staring at the ceiling this time. She got up immediately. Her steps were lighter. Not forced, just easier. She walked into the kitchen, still a little messy from the night before. Plates left out. Glasses on the counter. Signs of life. Instead of cleaning it immediately, she smiled, because for the first time in a long time, the mess meant something good. Her phone buzzed. She picked it up. Saturday is happening, right? Don't cancel on me. Alice laughed softly. I'm not canceling anything, she typed back. Another message came instantly. Good. Because I'm bringing energy with me. She shook her head. Please do. That was the moment it became real. Not just a shift, not just a feeling, but a decision she was actively stepping into. The rest of the week moved differently, not rushed, not heavy, intentional. Alice left the house more, came back with stories instead of silence. She started dressing differently too, not dramatically, but with more presence. Not to impress anyone, but because she felt like herself again. By the time Saturday arrived, the house was ready, not perfect, not staged, but open. Alice stood in the living room for a second, looking around, music playing, lights warm, space clear. Then, the first knock came. She didn't hesitate, opened the door. Finally, came the voice as soon as it opened. I thought you changed your mind. Alice stepped aside. Not this time. The house filled quickly, not overcrowded, but alive. Voices layered over each other. Laughter moved from one corner to another. Music adjusted to match the mood. Alice moved through it naturally, not hosting out of obligation, but participating. That was the difference. She wasn't managing the space. She was part of it. At one point, she stood near the kitchen again, watching everything. People talking, someone dancing slightly near the speaker, someone else laughing too loud. And for a second, she just observed, not detached, grateful. Because this energy used to feel like home, and now it felt like home again. A voice pulled her back. You look different. Alice turned slightly. Different how? Relaxed, the voice said. Like you're not carrying something heavy anymore. Alice paused, then nodded. Yeah, she said. I think I finally put it down. They stood there for a moment, not needing to explain further, because some changes don't need words. They show. Later, the music picked up. Someone grabbed Alice's hand. Come on, she laughed. I'm cooking. You can cook later, the voice insisted. And this time, she didn't resist. She stepped into the middle of the room, not performing, just moving freely. And the moment she did, something shifted again, not inside her, around her, because her energy pulled others in, and suddenly, the room felt even more alive. That night didn't end early. No one checked the time. No one rushed out, because no one felt like they had to. At one point, Alice stepped outside briefly, just to catch her breath. The cool air hit her lightly. She leaned against the wall, listened to the sound from inside. Laughter, music, life. And, for a second, she thought about Alex, not emotionally, not painfully, just neutrally, because the contrast was clear now, not in comparison, but in experience. Inside, she felt connected. Before, she felt contained. That difference was everything. She stepped back inside. The energy wrapped around her again, natural, easy. And in that moment, there was no space for what used to be missing, because nothing was missing anymore. Now pause for a second, because this part matters. Have you ever had to step away from something just to find yourself again? Not because you were weak, but because you needed space to remember who you were. Drop a comment, because moments like this, they don't always come with noise, but they change everything. The night continued. At some point, Alice found herself back in the kitchen, not alone this time. Someone stood beside her, helping, not taking over, not controlling, just there. Careful, she said, laughing slightly. That's not how I do it. Then show me, came the reply. She did, not instructing, sharing. And that felt different too, because there was no pressure, no expectation, no feeling of needing to adjust, just presence. Balanced. Alice noticed it, but didn't overthink it. She let it exist, and that was new, because before, everything felt like it needed to be managed. Now, it just flowed. As the night settled, people slowly began to leave. Not abruptly, gradually. Hugs, laughter, see you soon. Eventually, the door closed. The house quieted again, but this time, the silence felt different, not empty, full. Alice stood in the middle of the room again, looking around. The same space, but no longer carrying the weight it once did. She turned off the music, slowly, and even without it, The room still felt alive. She exhaled, then smiled, because now she understood something clearly. Healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in connection, and she had found hers again. The house stayed quiet the next morning, but not the kind of quiet that felt empty. This quiet rested. Alice moved through the space, slowly, not out of hesitation, but because there was no pressure to rush. She cleaned up what was left from the night before: glasses, plates, a chair slightly out of place. Each movement felt simple, uncomplicated. At one point, she paused, looked at the counter, then smiled slightly, because she remembered something. Not everything, just a moment. Standing there, cooking, laughing, not alone. She shook her head lightly. "Focus," she said to herself, and continued cleaning. Later that day, Alice stepped out, not because she needed to escape the house, but because she felt like moving. The city felt familiar again, not overwhelming, not distant, just present. She walked, without a strict destination, past shops, people, sounds blending into each other. At some point, she stopped. A small bookstore cafe. She looked at it for a second, then let out a quiet breath, because she recognized it, not as a memory to avoid, but as something that no longer held weight over her. Alice stepped inside, the same kind of space: books, coffee, low conversations. She ordered something simple, waited, then moved to sit. There was only one open seat, across from someone. He looked up briefly as she approached. "Is this taken?" she asked. "No," he replied. She sat, placed her cup down. For a moment, nothing happened. No forced interaction, no immediate conversation, just shared space. Alice opened a book, not deeply focused, just passing time. After a few minutes, a voice came. "You're not reading that." She looked up. He wasn't looking directly at her, but the corner of his mouth suggested he knew exactly what he said. "What makes you think that?" she asked. "You've turned the same page twice," he replied. Alice paused, then laughed. "Okay, fair." She closed the book. "Maybe I'm just pretending to be productive." "That's honest," he said. She tilted her head slightly. "You don't pretend?" He shook his head once. "No point. Simple." That answer didn't try to impress, didn't stretch. It just, what? They didn't rush into conversation. It built slowly, one sentence at a time. "What are you actually thinking about?" he asked. Alice considered the question, then answered, "Nothing complicated." A pause. Just how different things feel now. He glanced at her. Different good, or different unclear. She thought about it, then said, "Different. Steady." He nodded slightly. "That's better than most people get." Silence returned, but this time, it wasn't empty. It was comfortable. After a while, Alice stood up. "I should go," she said. He nodded. "Yeah." No pressure to stay. No attempt to extend the moment. She picked up her cup, then paused, looked at him. "You come here often?" she asked, a small smile. "Sometimes." She nodded. "Okay." And that was it. No exchange of numbers. No forced continuation. Just acknowledgement. Alice stepped outside. The air felt the same, but she didn't carry anything with her. Not expectation, not curiosity, just a simple awareness. Days passed. Not dramatically, not with anticipation, just normally. Then she went back. Not planned, not intentional, just happened. He was there again. Same seat, same posture, different moment. She walked over, still pretending not to read. He asked. Alice smiled. "Maybe." She sat, and this time, conversation came easier. "What do you do when you're not pretending?" he asked. Alice leaned back slightly. "Live." He raised an eyebrow. "That sounds vague." She shrugged. "It's supposed to." He nodded, then said, "Fair." The exchange didn't try to be deep. It didn't need to be, because there was no pressure behind it. Alice noticed something. There was no need to adjust herself, no need to explain her energy, no need to reduce or expand anything. She was just there, and that was enough. At one point, she stood up again. "I'll see you around," she said. Not a question, just a possibility. He nodded. "Yeah." And that was it. No rush, no expectation, no pressure. Just two people meeting where they were. Without trying to change it, Alice walked away. This time, with something different. Not attachment, not excitement, but ease. Because whatever this was, it didn't demand anything from her. And that felt safe. Back at home, She placed her keys down, walked into the living room, looked around. The same space she had reclaimed, still hers, still full. She sat down, and for the first time, she didn't think about what was missing, because nothing was, and whatever came next would come naturally, not forced, not rushed, just right. Alex's apartment was exactly how he wanted it, clean, minimal, everything in its place, no noise, no unexpected interruptions, no sudden shifts in energy, just order. At first, that felt right. The first few days after he left Alice, he noticed the difference immediately. No conversations waiting for him, no music playing in the background, no moments that required emotional attention. Just space, and space, to him, meant control. He woke up early, made his coffee, sat at the table, same routine, same structure. It worked. For a while, weeks passed. Nothing disrupted his schedule. Work, home, sleep, repeat. Predictable, and that predictability gave him something he thought he needed. Relief, no tension, no disagreements, no moments where he felt out of place, just quiet. At night, he sat alone at the table, dinner in front of him, simple, consistent. He ate slowly, not distracted, not rushed, just alone. At first, that didn't bother him, he told himself. This is better than trying to keep up with something that didn't feel natural, better than constantly adjusting, better than feeling like he didn't belong. And for a while, he believed it. But something subtle started happening, not immediately, not noticeably. Small things, the kind you don't pay attention to at first. He stopped finishing his meals, not because they weren't good, but because they felt incomplete. He started leaving the TV on, not watching it, just letting it fill the silence. He caught himself checking his phone, without expecting a message. And then, one evening, something shifted. Alex sat at the table again. Same position, same routine. He picked up his fork, took a bite, paused, not because of the food, because of the silence. It wasn't new, but it felt different. He leaned back slightly, looked around. The apartment hadn't changed. Still clean, still controlled, still exactly how he preferred it. But something didn't feel right. He sat there longer than usual, listening to nothing. And for the first time, that nothing didn't feel peaceful. It felt empty. Alex frowned slightly, not reacting strongly, just noticing. He picked up his fork again, tried to continue eating, but his attention wasn't on the meal anymore. It had shifted, because something had entered his mind without permission. A memory. Alice, not in detail, just a moment. Her voice, laughing, loud, uncontrolled. He stopped, put the fork down. That memory didn't belong in this space. This space wasn't built for that kind of energy. And yet, it stayed. He shook his head slightly, tried to dismiss it. It's just habit, he muttered. But the thought didn't leave, because once something feels missing, you can't ignore it completely. Alex stood up, walked into the living room, turned on the TV, volume slightly higher than usual, not to watch, just to fill the room. He sat down, focused on the screen, but his mind didn't stay there. It went back, not to arguments, not to tension, but to moments he hadn't paid attention to before. Alice, moving through the kitchen, music playing, talking while doing something else, laughing at something small. Those moments didn't feel important at the time, but now they stood out, not because they were dramatic, but because they were present, and presence was something his current life lacked. Alex leaned forward, turned the TV volume down. The silence returned, and this time, he didn't try to block it. He sat in it, fully aware, because now he understood something he hadn't before. Quiet and emptiness are not the same thing, and what he had built was starting to feel like the second one. He stood up again, walked toward the window, looked outside, people moving, voices carrying faintly from the street, life happening. He watched for a moment, then stepped back. The apartment felt smaller now, not physically, but emotionally, because without connection, space doesn't expand. It closes in. Alex ran a hand over his face, exhaled slowly. For the first time since leaving, he didn't feel certain, not about his decision, not about his life, just unsure. And that uncertainty didn't come loudly. It settled quietly, the same way everything else had. But this time, He noticed it, and once you notice something like that, you can't go back to not seeing it. That was the beginning, not of regret, not yet, but of awareness. And awareness always leads somewhere, even if you're not ready for where it takes you. The next evening didn't start any differently. Alex followed the same routine. Work ended. He closed his laptop, stood up, walked into the kitchen. No hesitation, no decision-making. Everything was automatic. He opened the fridge, took out what he needed, prepared his meal. Every step was efficient, measured, no wasted movement, no distraction. The kind of routine that usually made him feel in control. But today, something felt slightly off. Not enough to stop him, but enough to be noticed. He placed the plate on the table, sat down, picked up his fork, took a bite, chewed, swallowed, paused. It happened again. That same moment where everything slowed. Not physically, but mentally. Alex looked at the table. Nothing had changed. Same chair, same plate, same quiet. But the silence felt heavier tonight. Not because it was louder, because he was paying attention to it now. He leaned back slightly. His eyes moved across the room, then back to the table. And that's when it happened. Not slowly, instantly. A memory, clear, uninvited. Alice, standing in the kitchen, music playing. She wasn't doing anything special, just cooking. But she wasn't still. She moved as she worked, turning slightly, stepping back, laughing at something that hadn't even fully happened yet. "Come taste this," she said in the memory. Alex remembered it clearly. The way she held the spoon out, expecting him to respond. Not asking, expecting. He had walked over, tried it. "It's not finished," he said. Alice rolled her eyes. "I know that," she replied. "I want to know if it's going in the right direction." That moment stayed, longer than it should have. Back in the present, Alex blinked. The apartment returned, silent, still. He looked at his plate again. Then, at the empty chair across from him. There was no voice, no movement, no interruption, just space. He picked up his fork again, tried to continue eating, but something had shifted. The food didn't taste different, but the experience did, because now there was something to compare it to, and that comparison wasn't in his favor. Alex put the fork down, not because he was full, because he lost interest. He sat there, hands resting on the table, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. Another memory came. This time, not visual, auditory. Alice's voice, talking while doing something else, switching topics without warning, laughing mid-sentence, calling his name from another room. Not because she needed something, but because she wanted to share something. That kind of energy used to feel overwhelming. Now, it felt distant. And distance has a way of changing how you interpret things. What once felt like too much now felt like something missing. Alex exhaled slowly, not sharply, just enough to release something building inside him. He stood up, carried his plate to the sink, didn't wash it immediately, just left it there. That wasn't like him. Normally, everything would be done right away, clean, organized, finished. But tonight, he didn't care about that. He walked into the living room, sat down, didn't turn the TV on. He just sat, letting the silence exist. And for the first time, he didn't try to fill it, because now he was starting to understand it. This wasn't peace. It just looked like it. What he had built, what he thought he wanted. It removed tension, but it also removed connection. And without connection, everything else felt incomplete. Alex leaned forward, rested his elbows on his knees. His eyes stayed fixed on the floor. "I thought this would feel better," he said quietly. No one responded, of course, but the statement still mattered, because it was the first time. He questioned his decision out loud, not defensively, not emotionally, just honestly. He sat there for a while, not moving, not distracting himself, and the more he stayed in that moment, the clearer something became. He didn't miss the arguments. He didn't miss the discomfort. He didn't miss the feeling of not fitting. He missed something else. Presence. That feeling of someone being fully there, in the same space, sharing it, adding to it. Alice had that, naturally, without trying. And he had removed himself from it. Alex leaned back slowly, ran a hand over his face again. This time, the thought didn't feel small. It stayed. "I might have been wrong." That wasn't regret yet, but it was the beginning of it. Because once you question a decision, you start revisiting everything that led to it. And when you revisit something honestly, you don't always like what you find. Alex stood up again, walked toward the window, looked out. The city was still moving, people still living, connections still happening. Everywhere outside of his space, and inside, there was none. That contrast hit differently now, because it wasn't invisible anymore. It was clear, and clarity doesn't let you stay comfortable. It pushes, slowly, but consistently, towards something you either face or avoid. And Alex was getting closer to facing it, even if he wasn't ready yet. Alex didn't go to bed immediately that night. He stayed in the living room, lights dim, silence intact, not distracting himself, not reaching for anything, just sitting with what had already started forming in his mind. The thought from earlier didn't leave. It stayed, clearer now, not loud, but firm. I might have been wrong. He repeated it quietly. This time, it didn't feel like a passing idea. It felt like something that needed to be understood. Alex leaned forward again, rested his hands together. His mind didn't jump between thoughts. It focused on one thing, Alice, not the disagreements, not the tension, but the moments he dismissed, the ones he labeled as too much. He remembered how she moved through space, not waiting for permission, not adjusting her presence. He remembered how easily she connected with people, how naturally she filled a room, and how often he pulled back instead of stepping forward. That pattern became clearer the more he sat with it. It wasn't her energy that created distance. It was his response to it. Alex exhaled slowly, because that realization carried weight, not guilt, responsibility. I didn't meet her halfway, he said under his breath. That was the first complete thought, not vague, not uncertain, clear. And once that became clear, everything else followed. He thought about the arguments they never had, not because there was nothing to argue about, but because he avoided the conversation entirely. He thought about the moments she tried to engage, tried to include him, and how often he gave minimal responses instead of real ones, not intentionally, but consistently. And consistency is what shapes outcomes. Alex stood up slowly, walked toward the kitchen. The plate from earlier was still in the sink, untouched. He looked at it, then turned the tap on, washed it, not because it mattered, but because he needed movement, something to match the shift happening inside him. As he dried his hands, another thought came, stronger than the last. Not a question, a realization. It wasn't her. He paused, then said it again. It wasn't her. That sentence didn't carry hesitation. It landed fully, because now he understood something he hadn't allowed himself to see before. Alice didn't create the distance. She responded to it, and by the time she stopped trying, he had already stepped too far back. Alex leaned against the counter, his eyes fixed ahead, because now there was no confusion left, no justification, no alternative explanation, just truth. And truth doesn't give you many places to hide. He ran a hand over his face again, slower this time, more deliberate. I left because I didn't know how to stay, he said quietly. That was it. The full realization, not about Alice, about himself. And once he understood that, everything changed, because now the decision he made didn't feel complete anymore. It felt unfinished. Alex pushed himself off the counter, walked back into the living room, picked up his phone, stopped, because calling didn't feel right. Texting didn't feel right. This wasn't something that could be explained from a distance. It needed presence, the same thing he had avoided before. That realization led to one clear thought. I need to go back. He didn't say it dramatically. He didn't hesitate. He just knew. Not because he expected things to be the same, not because he believed it would be easy, but because he needed to face what he walked away from and understand it fully. Alex grabbed his coat, didn't overthink it, didn't sit back down, because if he delayed, he might start questioning it again. And this time, he didn't want to avoid the truth. He stepped outside. The air hit him immediately, cool, sharp, grounding. The city looked the same, but it felt different, not because anything had changed, but because he was paying attention now. Every step felt intentional, not rushed, but directed. He walked through streets he had passed many times before, but this time, he noticed things, people talking, laughter in the distance, movement that felt connected, things he had ignored before, because now he understood their value. The closer he got, the more something built inside him. Not fear, not doubt, tension, because he didn't know what he would find. He didn't know what had changed. He didn't know if anything was still there. But for the first time, he accepted that he might not control the outcome, and that was new. Alex slowed slightly as he approached the street, the one he knew, the one that led to the house. Memories surfaced, not overwhelming, just present, moments, conversations, silences, all leading to this. He reached the front, stopped. The house stood the same. From the outside, nothing had changed, but he knew better now, because change doesn't always show itself externally. It happens inside. Alex stood there for a moment, looking at the door. His chest tightened slightly, not from fear, from understanding, because now he wasn't coming back as the same person who left. He was coming back as someone who finally understood what he lost, and that understanding came with uncertainty. He raised his hand, paused, then knocked, and just like that, everything he thought he knew was about to be tested. The knock had already been made. There was no taking it back. Alex stood still, hand lowered slowly to his side. The seconds that followed didn't feel normal. They stretched, each one carrying weight, not because of time, but because of what waited on the other side of the door. His chest tightened slightly, not from fear, from anticipation, because in his mind, this moment had already played out more than once. He had imagined it, refined it, adjusted it. Alice opens the door. She pauses. There's emotion, not anger, not distance, something unfinished, something that says, there's still something there. That's what he believed, not perfectly, but enough to come back. Footsteps approached from inside. Alex straightened slightly, subtle but instinctive, because even now, he wanted to present himself in a way that made sense, that fit the moment. The handle turned, a soft click, the door opened, and there she was, Alice. For a brief moment, everything else disappeared. The street behind him, the sounds around him, all of it faded, because now it was just her, standing there, looking at him. And immediately, something didn't match. It wasn't her appearance. She looked the same, but not in the way he remembered. There was something else, something he couldn't place right away. Her posture, relaxed, her expression, calm. There was no pause of shock, no visible emotional shift, no reaction that matched what he expected, just recognition. Alec, her voice was steady, not cold, not warm, just clear. That alone disrupted everything he had prepared. Hi, he replied. The word felt smaller than he intended, less certain. For a moment, neither of them moved. Alex searched her face, looking for something, a signal, something familiar, something that told him he still belonged somewhere in this space, but he didn't find it. Instead, he found something else, closure, not spoken, but present. I wanted to talk, he said, straightforward, no build-up, no explanation. Alice studied him for a second, not evaluating, just seeing him. Then she nodded, okay, and stepped aside. That wasn't what he expected either. He thought there would be hesitation, a pause, some kind of resistance, but there wasn't, just space, given without effort. Alex stepped inside, and immediately, he felt it. The difference. The house was the same, but not the same. The air felt warmer, lighter. There was sound, soft music playing somewhere in the background. That alone was enough to shift something in him, because this wasn't the house he left. That house was quiet, controlled. This one felt lived in. Alex moved a few steps forward. His eyes scanned the space, taking it in. There were small changes, subtle, but noticeable. A different arrangement, a different energy. And then something caught his attention. A jacket, not his. It hung casually over a chair, not placed carefully, just there. His eyes moved. Shoes, near the door, not his. A second cup, on the table, still warm. Alex's mind reacted quickly, trying to place it. Visitors, friends, that made sense. It had to make sense, because the alternative. He didn't let himself go there, not yet. He turned slightly toward Alice, about to say something, and then a voice came from deeper inside the house, a man's voice, relaxed, comfortable. Babe, is that the delivery? Everything stopped, not gradually, instantly. Alex didn't move, didn't react, didn't breathe. The sound didn't echo. It landed, and in that moment, everything he believed he was coming back to collapsed. He turned slowly, not fully, just enough to confirm something. Alice didn't react, didn't rush to explain, didn't shift. She simply stood there, calm, grounded, and that told him everything, because there was no confusion in her, only clarity. And for the first time since he arrived, Alex understood something without needing it. Explained. This wasn't his space anymore, not emotionally, not practically, not in any way that mattered. And whatever he thought he was walking back into didn't exist anymore. The realization didn't come with anger. It came with silence, the kind that leaves no room for denial. And standing there, inside a space he once called his, Alex felt something shift completely. Not hope, not expectation, understanding. And it came too late. The words didn't repeat. They didn't need to. Babe, is that the delivery? They stayed in the air, clear, unmistakable. Alex stood where he was, still, not because he didn't want to move, but because his body hadn't caught up to what his mind had just processed. His eyes shifted slightly, not fully turning, just enough to look deeper into the space. The house didn't react. Nothing changed physically. The music continued, soft, unbothered, and that made it real, because if this moment was unusual, the space would have reflected it, but it didn't, which meant this wasn't new. This wasn't unexpected. This was normal. Alex swallowed slowly, not forcing a reaction, just trying to understand what was now in front of him. His gaze moved again, back to the jacket. This time, he looked at it differently, not as something out of place, but as something that belonged. Then the shoes, positioned casually, not temporary, used. Then the mug, still warm, recently touched. Each detail added weight, not suddenly, but steadily. Alex's chest tightened, not sharply, but enough to make him aware of his breathing. He exhaled slowly. Then finally, he spoke. I didn't expect this. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't carry accusation, just truth. Alice looked at him, not surprised by the statement, not defensive. I know, she said. That response landed differently, because it confirmed something. She had already considered this moment. She knew what it would look like. She understood what he was seeing before he even said it. There was no confusion between them, just awareness. A brief silence followed, not heavy, but full. Then, footsteps from the same direction as the voice, steady, unhurried. Alex didn't turn immediately, but he heard them, measured, comfortable. And then he appeared. The man stepped into view. No rush, no tension in his posture. He looked between Alex and Alice, calm, aware. Hey, he said simply, not confrontational, not uncertain. Then he turned slightly toward Alice. Everything okay? That question shifted something, because it wasn't asked with control. It wasn't asked with suspicion. It was asked with care. Alice nodded. Yeah, she said. I've got it. The man didn't push, didn't stay, didn't insert himself further into the moment. He simply stepped back, giving space, without being told to. That detail didn't go unnoticed, not by Alec, because in that brief exchange, something became clear. This wasn't forced. This wasn't unstable. This was balanced, and that realization carried more weight than anything else. Alex finally turned slightly, not fully facing him, but enough to acknowledge his presence. Then back to Alice, because now the focus wasn't on who that man was. It was on what had changed and what hadn't. Alice hadn't become someone else. She had become more of who she already was, and someone else had met her there. Alex felt it then, not anger, not jealousy, something more difficult, recognition, because standing there, he understood something clearly. It wasn't that she needed a different life. She needed someone who could exist fully within it, and he hadn't. That truth didn't come from what he saw. It came from what he felt, and what he felt was absence, not in the room, but in himself. Alex let out a slow breath, then looked around again, this time not searching, observing. The house didn't feel unfamiliar. It felt complete, just without him. He nodded slightly, more to himself than anyone else, because now the situation didn't need explanation. It made sense, even if he wasn't ready for it. He looked back at Alice, and for the first time since arriving, he didn't see what he expected. He saw what was real. You've moved on, he said. It wasn't a question. Alice held his gaze, then nodded once. Yes. No hesitation. No softening. Just truth. That single word settled everything, because it confirmed what the room had already shown. There was no space left for interpretation. No room for assumption. Just reality. And standing inside it, Alex felt the full weight of what he had come back to. Not a possibility, a conclusion. And for the first time, he didn't try to change it, because some things, once they've moved forward, don't pause for you to catch up. They continue, with or without you. And now, he was the one outside of that movement. Not because he was pushed out, but because he stepped away. That difference mattered, and he understood it now completely. But understanding something doesn't change where you stand, and where he stood was no longer beside her. It was across from her, as someone who used to belong there. And that was the hardest part to accept. The space between them felt different now, not tense, not hostile, just clear. Alex stood still for a moment longer, then finally moved. He stepped further into the room, slow, measured. Not like someone returning, like someone entering a place they no longer understood. Alice gestured lightly toward a chair. Sit. He hesitated for a brief second, then nodded, sat down. The distance between them wasn't far, but it wasn't close either. It wasn't where they used to be. For a moment, neither of them spoke, not because they didn't have anything to say, but because they both knew whatever came next mattered. Alex leaned forward slightly, rested his hands together. I didn't come here to 'cause anything, he said. Alice nodded. I know. Her tone didn't carry suspicion or doubt, just acknowledgement. Another pause. Then Alex spoke again. I thought maybe we could talk about fixing things. The word sat between them. Fixing. Alice didn't react immediately. She looked at him, not searching, just listening. Fix what, Alex? She asked. That question landed quietly, but it carried weight because it required clarity, not assumption. He opened his mouth slightly, then paused. I mean, us. Alice tilted her head slightly. But which version? She asked. That stopped him, because there wasn't just one answer, and for the first time, he realized that. The one before everything changed, he said. Alice gave a small, almost thoughtful smile. It didn't change suddenly, she replied. No accusation, no sharpness, just truth. You left, she continued. Alex nodded slightly. I know. But not just that day, she added. His expression shifted, because he understood what she meant. You started pulling away long before that, she said. I see that now, he admitted. There was no resistance in his voice. No attempt to defend himself, just acceptance. Alice leaned back slightly. I kept trying to reach you, she said. Alex didn't interrupt, didn't explain. But at some point, she continued, I realized I was the only one trying to hold anything together. That wasn't said with emotion. It was said with clarity, and clarity doesn't leave room for argument. Alex looked down briefly, then back up. I didn't realize what I was doing, he said. Alice nodded once. I believe that response surprised him slightly, not because she agreed, but because she wasn't trying to make him feel worse. She was just stating what was real. I thought I needed space, he continued. You did, she replied. That made him pause, because he expected disagreement. But space doesn't fix distance, she added. That landed fully. Alex leaned back slightly. His eyes moved briefly around the room, then returned to her. You seem different, he said. Alice smiled. Not carefully, not guarded, just honestly. I am. No explanation followed. None was needed. Alex studied her for a moment, then asked, Are you happy? This time, her answer came, without delay. Yes, simple, clear, unforced. That answer settled deeper than anything else, because it didn't depend on him. It didn't reference the past. It existed on its own. Alex nodded slowly. I'm glad, he said. And for the first time, that statement wasn't difficult to say, because even though it cost him something, it also gave him something. Understanding. He leaned forward again, then asked quietly, Did you ever miss me? Alice paused. Not because she was unsure, because she wanted to answer correctly. Yes, she said. A small shift in Alex's posture. Hope. Briefly. But she continued. I missed who I thought you were, she said. That was the moment. The third drop, not harsh, not cruel, but precise, because it separated two things clearly. The idea of him and who he became. Alex didn't react immediately. He just absorbed it, because deep down, he understood it. He wasn't being rejected. He was being seen clearly, and that clarity left no space for denial. He nodded once. "I understand," he said, and he meant it, not as a response, but as a realization, because now he saw everything as it was, not how he wanted it to be, not how he imagined it, but how it truly happened. "I didn't know how to show up the way you needed," he said. Alice didn't interrupt, and by the time I realized that, it was too late. She held his gaze, then nodded. "Yes," she said softly. "No bitterness, no anger, just truth. The kind that doesn't need emphasis." Alex stood up slowly, not rushed, not hesitant, just ready. "I didn't come here to take anything from you," he said. "I know," she replied. "I just needed to understand." Alice gave a small nod. "You do now." He looked around one last time, not searching, not holding on, just acknowledging. Then his eyes returned to her. "Do you think it could have been different?" he asked. Alice thought about it. "Not long, but honestly, yes," she said. A small pause. "Only if you were." That was the final truth. Not complicated, not emotional, just complete. Alex nodded slowly, because there was nothing else to say. No argument, no alternative, just acceptance. He walked toward the door. Alice followed, not closely, but enough. He reached for the handle, paused, then turned slightly. "Take care of yourself," he said. "You too," she replied, and that was it. No dramatic ending, no final moment, just closure. He opened the door, stepped outside. The air felt different this time, not heavy, not uncertain, clear, because now he understood what leaving meant, not just physically, but completely. Behind him, the door closed. Inside, life continued. Music, voices, presence. Outside, Alex stood still for a second, then took a breath and walked forward, not back, forward, because some lessons only come after you lose what mattered. Now tell me, after everything you just saw, do you think Alex deserved a second chance? Or was Alice right to move forward? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story made you think differently about relationships, like this video and subscribe to Mr. Georges Stories, because sometimes the hardest truths are the ones we need to hear the most.